Okay, good morning, everyone, or good evening, or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. I am here with the wonderful IndieBio team, and my name is Parikshit. I'm a principal at IndieBio, which is one of the SOSV accelerators. SOSV is the Accelerator VC, a global $700 million fund. And for those of you who don't know what IndieBio does, we and our panelists today will share their stories, and through their stories and work, we will learn more about who we are, what we do, and more importantly, how we're shaping the new biotech, which is what we're discussing today. And it's such a relevant topic, couldn't be more important now than ever. This is 8 months into the pandemic when we all somewhere deep down start thinking if this is the new normal, is a fear I have. But then one place of hope is the news. And the news, surprisingly, is full of biotechnology. The superheroes no longer wear capes, and we are glued to the screens for a vaccine race. And this panel couldn't come at a more relevant time when we are looking into what's new with biotechnology, which is at the forefront. So I'm very excited today to kick off this discussion. And let me get right into it with an introduction of our panelists. Uh, would you guys like to introduce yourself? I'll start with Jun, who is our CSO and partner at IndieBio. Jun, would you like to tell the audience a bit about your role here?
Hi, everyone, and thank you all for joining us. My name is Jun Axup. I'm CSO and partner at IndieBio. I'm based in San Francisco. IndieBio has been around for 5 years. I guess we can talk more about IndieBio in a moment. My personal background, I have a PhD in chemical biology from the Scripps Research Institute. I come to IndieBio through co-founding a company that actually went through the program, IndieBio itself, and then ended up on the side on staff. And my role is to advise companies, especially on the scientific side, run scientific programming, invest in companies, and build community.
Great, thank you, Jun. Maya?
Hi, I'm Maya Lockwood, and I'm the head of investor relations here at IndieBio. And my role is to expand our syndicate and find new investors that are aligned with our vision. I also help oversee the communication strategy, building community, and a big thought leadership piece of that.
Awesome. And Julie joining us from our New York location, just wrapping up the inaugural IndieBio New York class.
Yes, thanks, Pariksha, for that introduction and mention of our demo day, which we hope all of our attendees will attend. Maybe we could put something about that into the chat. But at any rate, my name is Julie Wolfe, and I'm the communications director at our new outfit. Newly opened March 2020, went to work for the first time March 1st, started working from home March 14th. But we've been really lucky to work very closely with you guys at the San Francisco flagship program as we build out the IndieBio family on the East Coast. And we can talk about that later on in the panel.
And finally, our latest and greatest hire, Pae, our CTO. Please go ahead.
Hi, everybody. My name is Pae. I just joined IndieBio shortly after the New York office opened, actually. My background is actually in electrical engineering. I have a PhD from Duke University, and I spent nearly a decade working with the DoD in technical program management in emerging technologies. And came to IndieBio after a stint with a moonshot factory in Europe.
That's great. Thank you, guys. Very excited to kick off this discussion. And I'm actually going to go back to the introduction where we were talking about the news and biotechnology being more relevant than ever. And the race for a vaccine, for therapeutics, for diagnostics has shown us how biology is a technology. But this is one sliver of the range of technologies that encompass biotechnology. And there's a lot of definitions. Why don't actually, June, you get us started on traditionally how we perceive biotechnology, and maybe later we can go into the evolution. But yeah, when we think of biology and the technology and contextualizing these developments that we're seeing in the light of the pandemic, that'll be great.
Yeah, I think traditionally biology is actually a natural sciences where you're looking through a microscope and understanding how the human body works, right? So biology turning into technology, I would say, has been something that only has been accelerated over the last couple of decades as technologies around manipulating biology and synthetic biology has really taken off. Kind of like coding, right? And coding a computer. There was a computer, now you can start doing all kinds of engineering with it. We didn't have those tools for the longest time. And really over the last 70 years, have we really perfected even ability to read, write, copy, cut, and paste DNA. So using that now, so it has really expanded what biology as a technology can do and as an engineering science can do. So I think traditionally for hundreds of years, biotech was considered therapeutics. And a lot of that has been observations through nature, finding a tree bark and turning that into a drug or something. And now we're a little bit more on the side of actually rationally designing these things. So what we see, I think traditionally the way biotech companies have started has definitely has a lot of ties with academia, but usually it's a different team that builds a biotech company than the one in academia. And we think that that's no longer needs to happen. We think that PhDs and other scientists can actually take their own science that they've been working on and build a company out of that. So that's one area that we're kind of challenging. We think that scientists themselves can become entrepreneurs, and also expanding what biology can do outside of therapeutics into food, agriculture, climate change related things, biomaterials. Pretty much everything we see and use around us has some relation to biology and can be potentially improved upon using biotechnology.
That's a great anchor to this discussion. Thank you for starting us off there, June. A lot to unpack, which we will over the hour. And Maya, I know you have been very passionate about this new form of biotechnology that June describes. The new people, the new places, and IndieBio has been at the forefront of this change, of this inflection point. Maybe you want to share with the audience a bit about how we fit in to this new biotech.
Yeah, so IndieBio began about 5 years ago when there was a convergence of this growing pool of talent, PhDs leaving their academia. They would have a choice. Do they want to continue working in academia, or were they going to start their own companies? And with the greater capabilities that we've seen in science and technology, there was this now huge pool of talent who can start their own companies. And the sustainable solutions, there was a huge demand for sustainable solutions. And so it seemed like the right time for an IndieBio to begin. More VCs and corporates were funding life sciences. And so IndieBio really started as an experiment to give these scientists a chance to become entrepreneurs and to help them bring their ideas to market. We took the risk that nobody else would take, and that was to really assess the merit of these teams and evaluate them. And when other people weren't making investments, we were doing food, agriculture, medical devices, tools, biopharma, neurotech, computational bio, industrial bio, and regenerative medicine at the very early stages. So we did not know where this was going to go. And so we're very excited to be here today, 5 years later.
And this was down in the trenches in a lab in San Francisco, right? Yeah, so really coming from the trenches of the frontiers of biotechnology in a way. And that was 5 years ago. So we have been around for 5 years now. June, you have been, you've seen the evolution, and what are some of the top of mind, high level insights we can draw as from this portfolio as it's hit this critical mass over the past 5 years?
Yeah, I think Maya said it really well. We started out as an experiment ourselves, and in some ways, IndieBio is a petri dish where we spread a whole bunch of startups on it, and then some will survive, some will not. And from that, we've gained a lot of knowledge on both on all different fronts, from the technology side, what works in the market, who's paying for what kind of technology, and then of course founders too, like what kind of good founder makeup, what kind of team architecture, culture within the company makes a successful company at these early stages. So that's been really exciting to see, and we've also experimented on across all kinds of different types of companies. And I think even in the 5 years, you know, a lot of it is kind of both responding to the way the world shifts, but also leading how the way the world can shift. And I think, you know, where we've decided to make investments have shaped parts of the biotech ecosystem, allowing more people to come in. So, you know, one example being in future food, we funded the first cellular meat company, Memphis Meat, and that kind of started a cascade of people realizing that this is indeed a huge problem, and that biotechnology was a technology that could solve that. And so since then, you know, we've looked at a lot of different areas, such as regenerative medicine, such as now getting into more climate change related things. So partly seeing the possibilities, connecting the early research to applicable science and turning them into companies to feed in more opportunities into the ecosystem. And I think that opens up opportunities both for VCs to see the impact that biotechnology can have, and more investment dollars, but also to really impact scientists themselves, for them to start thinking about how to apply their research and to, you know, develop their own careers once they leave academia, or if they choose to leave academia with a certain technology. So the community is growing a lot, and I think that's been the most exciting thing to see.
So it does seem that something has happened as far as the technology in itself is concerned, right? You also mentioned this research to technology to markets approach, and I would actually love to have Pae opine on the technology stack and just how the lenses with which we look at biology as a technology, and how you've seen that evolve, and yeah, how that relates to the IndieBio portfolio.
Sure. We see a lot of increase in our capacity to control the output of biology now. As June brought up, there's we have more coding capability now, which gives us more predictive control over what might be the outcomes from a biological process. So that I think has transitioned us somewhat elegantly into a biomanufacturing paradigm, so where biology is used to produce things. So whether it's molecules and materials, foods, proteins, things like that. Where I see new entry into this biotech space is really starting to integrate biological entities with what we traditionally view as sort of engineered systems. So whether it's digital systems, optical systems, things that humans are already very good at engineering, and we have very precise control over, how we can integrate those with biological entities that we have pretty good control over, and how do we turn those into new functional systems that do really useful things. We're seeing a lot of this convergence in the neurotech space, where new materials and digital systems are being able to interface really well and elegantly with biology, neurons, muscles, et cetera. And I think we're also seeing on the computational side a greater interest in what's referred to as sort of biomimetic computation. So the growth in neuromorphic computing, et cetera, and a return to analog computing because we have, again, better control over biological entities that may be able to drive us towards new, lower energy computational processes. So those are kind of three spaces that I see biology really producing technologies that hit a lot of sectors.
Wow. And actually that's a very interesting point to bring in Julie, who has been studying this evolution of not only biology, but how it has entered the popular narrative within scientists first, and now to the wider public. Maybe Julie, you want to take how Pae described this tech stack and convey it in the parlance of how scientists that were entrepreneurial scientists looking at it, and now the wider audience in the world. I would love to hear what you make of that.
Certainly. I think it's important to emphasize in today's conversation that the technologies can be a little bit hard to understand, but they are the types of technologies that are going to touch all of our everyday lives. The same way that, let's say, the car engine or electricity changed our lives in a way that I might not understand exactly as a molecular biologist by training, how turning on a switch is going to light my room. But I trust it to be safe and to be used for ways that are going to benefit society. And those same things that Pae was talking about, the neural interface with various components that may help us to better understand our biomarkers so that we don't have to go to the doctor as frequently and perhaps can just relay those over some sort of wireless device directly to your physician. We may not all know how they work at the very fine detailed level, but these are things that are going to affect our lives in positive ways going forward in both the human health example that I gave, but also, of course, in the planetary level to help find different solutions for some of the most pressing problems, such as climate change and scarcity of resources.
Yeah, and I guess when we do now eat an Impossible Burger, it's gone from just enthusiasts and biotech enthusiasts to just people eating it and not thinking a lot about what went in there. And
one of my favorite things to do, sorry to cut you off, Parikshit, but one of my favorite things to do is to ask my friends who are not scientists, who are not involved in this space, would you eat meat if it were grown in a lab, but it tasted exactly the same as the burgers that you would normally eat, as the steak or the filet that you would normally eat? And there's so much acceptance because people recognize the carbon footprint that their eating habits have, but they don't really want to change the way that they're living their lifestyle. There's cultural significance to the food that we eat. And so allowing people to maintain those lifestyles while simultaneously decreasing their planetary footprint, I think is something that you can get large buy-in regardless of whether people understand the regenerative medicine that Jun was talking about at the beginning, which is applied to these products that people will buy off the shelf eventually.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting how very quickly we have come from drugs, therapies, and vaccines for COVID to the burger, and that keeps happening at IndieBio, and we've not siloed it, right? The human health side and the what we call the planetary health side speak to each other, and maybe we can explain that and demystify that a bit for our audience today. So Jun, in terms of our portfolio, how do you think of the human health side of biotechnology, and how is that transferred over to this wider umbrella of planetary health? What's common, what's not?
Yeah, I think basically everything we know of ourselves and a lot of things around us are biology, and it grows naturally, right? Other than like minerals and things, but we have plants, we see bacteria, it's all over us, and so in some ways, like as individuals and as individual organisms, we are collectively our planet, and I think it just feeds in very organically, I guess, in that we're all kind of connected together. But one thing that for me personally was a shift maybe 2-3 years ago is that like my background came from much more of a human health perspective in immuno-oncology. And so always been thinking about how do we heal our own bodies. But then if you think about the planet, it's if the planet warms enough, if it all these catastrophes happen, then essentially that could wipe us all out. And I think right now we're experiencing that more than ever, both from the COVID virus side and also from the global warming side. We're experiencing all these disasters that seem very threatening to our lives. So that's how I kind of see the two are hand in hand. And in some ways, planetary health is more important, because if we don't have a planet, then our individual healths don't really matter either. So I mean, that's a little bit of a dark view on that, but that also shows how important it is and how important we need to be focused on helping to find climate solutions as well.
Well, as organisms, we are collectively the planet. You just said that. That's a very beautiful, somewhat poetic quote I'll take from that. And Pae, in terms of rational design and programming this transition from human and planetary health, how do you see our ability to program biology and the tree of life, if you will, evolve, and where are we in that process in terms of technologies?
Mute. I think the first forays that we're taking right now are in the space of looking at materials and manufacturing as a way to, and biology as a platform that allows us to do manufacturing in a more environmentally friendly way, a more energy efficient way. Biology really lends itself to energy efficiency and scalability. And so, we see this in one of our portfolio companies in MicroWorks, and they're taking on a pretty toxic industry, the leather industry, and doing so through the use of mushrooms, basically. And they're producing these materials more energy efficiently, without the toxic chemicals. And producing these supple, fine, luxurious leathers that allow people, people like leather. It feels nice. It's a great material, and this is a company that's able to allow us to, in some ways, have our cake and eat it too. And so I think that biological platform that's helping drive these shifts in big manufacturing sectors, whether it's in fashion or in building materials or in foods, these can have really long-term and shifting effects on our system, and then have hopefully generate some real positive impact on this climate change problem.
And it's crazy that these shifting events are based on these tiny microbial workhorses, right? Julie, I know you're our in-house microbial communications expert and also expert in microbial biology. Maybe you'd like to educate us a bit on the workhorses and these tiny microbes that are the new factory that this industry will be built on.
Certainly, yes. So I am a microbiologist by training, and I love microbes. And in fact, one of the reasons that I think IndieBio is had a lot of foresight was using investing in a lot of companies that use these microbes as their factories, because microbes can replicate very quickly. And when I say microbes, I'm usually talking about the kinds that you could imagine would grow to very high densities to produce something that may be engineered within its genome, either E. coli or yeast, something that is, not necessarily the infectious microbes that I think a lot of folks think of when they think germs, but we now have the ability to not only read the DNA that the microbes are, producing, but also to very finely kind of cut and paste, as June said, given, the Nobel Prize winning technology of CRISPR this past year, but also just the ability to add certain types of features that are not even necessarily microbial. Microbes can generate genes and genetic products from plants, from animals, from protists. I think Hyacinth Bio is one of the SOSP companies that's generating cannabinoids using a plethora of genes from throughout the kingdom of animal life, animal and plant life, and combining these in various ways, all within one workhorse organism. I believe they're using a yeast in order to synthesize these for medical use. So they're really the future, and one of the great benefits of them is that they're really cheap to feed and house relative to the organisms from which the genes came.
So what do they eat? And where do they live?
Yeah, where do they live?
Yeah.
So when I say cheap to feed and house, I mean, of course, you do have to have the infrastructure to make large numbers of them if you want to produce a whole lot of a certain product. But just comparing, let's say, the cannabinoids that you might get out of the actual plant itself, you can imagine an entire farm that would be required, as well as all of the processing machinery for purifying certain types of cannabinoids in this particular example, right? And then you'd have to make sure it was to a certain grade of purity. And with microbes, you can probably scale that down to, I don't know, I'm kind of spitballing here, 1/100th of the size, 1/1000th, right? Like you just need some sort of 100-gallon sized tank in order to make a greenhouse worth of material. And that really brings down the cost of everything, the footprint of land, the amount of energy that you need. They basically eat sugar and various types of sugars. So it's really a much more efficient system to use.
I see. And maybe one last question I'll ask in this direction before we switch over to people that are behind this new wave of biotechnology would be just the challenges that surround scale. These tanks where our friends, the microbes, will live and eat sugar. We need a lot of them, right? And even with the COVID vaccine, for example, if we do have one, we will have to start making it. And yeah, I would love to hear the panelists' thoughts on scale and the challenges of scale. Maybe Jun, you want to get us started there?
Yeah, I think we've been feeling the impacts of manufacturing because even if we do have an approved drug, it's going to take quite a while to manufacture enough to distribute across the entire world. So I think that that rollout is going to be very challenging. And I think that's one thing that I think in the last decade or two, there's been a lot of work on the synthetic biology side focused on, can we make it in microbes at all? And you can get a titer, maybe 1 gram per liter, and say that that's what you can work with at the moment. I think now we are entering into the biofermentation phase where how can we push the system to actually decrease the cost to be cost parity to whatever is currently out there. So a lot of these materials do have petroleum based chemicals or something involved currently. So can we get it as cheap as petroleum? That was the biggest question for biofuels. And now a lot of other chemicals are also kind of being compared that way. So I think we do have to build the infrastructure around that. Various nations are starting to produce facilities for this. A lot of that is actually being outsourced to China now. A lot of our biologics manufacturing for therapeutics have been sent to China, and do we need to have more of that in the US as well? And then also not just having tanks and scaling up in size, but also thinking about technologies that increase the production. We have a company that we invested in this batch that is finding ways to basically repopulate your cells so that they can rejuvenate them and have them produce more product using the same limited resources. So so I think we're seeing that new wave of secondary wave of companies come up that are all focused about the bioproduction, making it faster, making it more reliable, and hopefully higher production as well. So that's an interesting trend that we're hoping to have soon.
That's great. Yeah, when the enabling infrastructure of an application that is novel in itself starts becoming novel, I think that's a sign of a maturing industry. Very exciting. And to switch gears a bit, I want to bring the conversation to people, people that are spearheading the development of these technologies, but also there's an entire community of investors around it, and a community of policymakers and other stakeholders. Maya, you at IndieBio have been bringing together that community and spearheading a lot of our initiatives around this new biotechnology and the kind of stakeholders that we want to bring in. Could you please speak to the kind of people and perspectives we want to gather as we build this new biotech?
Yes, thank you, Parikshit. So first of all, I want to just focus on how we start building these world-changing companies. Well, it is truly all about the people and assessing the talent and seeing, building the ecosystem around them to help see these companies through to the end. What we've been learning from our companies as they graduate through our program is that they are raising a lot of capital and going on to create whole new industries. It's expected in the next 2 to 3 years that many of these companies will raise Series A. But as our long-term vision is to promote, improve human and planetary health and make more industries sustainable, as Pae mentioned, we're looking at all industries from cosmetics to construction, fashion, food, all of which we have found solutions for within our portfolio. It really requires the participation of more venture capital corporates, the public sector, and as you said, policymakers. So these are all of the stakeholders we're talking to right now. And in order for these companies to move on to the next level and grow, we need the participation of everyone. And so we recently created the Genesis Consortium, which is an alliance with Mayfield Fund, SOSV, and other like-minded VCs to promote human and planetary health, but also to allow for more people to co-invest along with us and increase the amount of dollars we're putting into startups at the pre-seed stage and to support more life science startups at the pre-seed stage. So you'll be able to learn more about these opportunities on the genesisconsortium.org website as it is developed. It's really important right now that this is a process of collaboration and that we are more inclusive in building the ecosystems so that everybody can become involved. Biology as a technology, as we're learning, is touching every aspect of our human and planetary life.
That's lovely. And within this ecosystem, June, you have seen the community really expand from the earliest days of the biohackers 5 years ago in little labs tinkering with biotechnology to where we have come now. And you've led with Maya all these meetups that have now, I think, brought hundreds of thousands. I think I can make that claim. Yes, people in aggregate over the past 5 years to IndieBio. I would love to hear your thoughts on the evolution of this community and the people that make it.
Yeah, I think there's kind of two different angles of like the main types of people. One is, of course, scientists becoming entrepreneurs. I think that concept hasn't been like popularized as much, and as over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of very notable companies that have started as a scientific founder who did their PhD and then took that into starting a company. They are now the role models that we can all see. I mean, in tech, you can probably name immediately like a dozen people who are these role models. And for a long time, we didn't have that. And so most people did not think that it was a possible path for themselves. now that there are more and more people now going into PhDs saying, I want to translate this and build this into a company one day. What kind of projects can I do? And there are more and more professors starting to say, this is really cool. I'm going to let my students do this and then, help them develop a company when they go off. So that concept, I would say that culture is still, very, very nascent for a lot of the country. I think, San Francisco, it's like pretty much all PhDs kind of have an entrepreneur track in the back of their head. But in a lot of the other parts of the country and around the world, that's still not possible or just not even presented as an option. But as we have more role models, and hopefully all of our IndieBio founders are now a part of that role model ecosystem, that we're going to inspire other people to leave academia with their own ideas and build a company out of it. And then on the other side, we've seen a lot of tech people get interested in biotech, and as well as investors who are traditionally in tech. And this is because I think, in some ways, a lot of people are, not too thrilled with like yet another food delivery app, even though it is actually pretty important during COVID. But there is a kind of a saturation of the social apps, the finance apps that people are doing, and people are trying to differentiate themselves and explore something that may be more impactful. And time again, I see people, mostly people who have had, tragedies within their family around cancer, around genetic diseases, that those are the folks who oftentimes are super motivated to say, wow, with all the tech and with all the knowledge I have, what can I do to help and cure these diseases? So we've seen a lot of people get interested in biology, and technology and computation has actually increased to the point where pretty much everything we do in biology will have some kind of computational component, even if it's just looking up DNA on your laptop, that the two are starting to become more hand in hand. And so we're seeing computational technology advance biology, and then biology data feeding into computational models, and that kind of back and forth is actually really, really exciting right now. And then of course health technology, and so all these opportunities are popping up where technologists are seeing how they can actually bring impact into healthcare, and then also now how they can bring impact into climate change.
Lovely. And yeah, you mentioned something around PhDs need entrepreneurial role models, and there's a lot of PhDs. And Julie, you're sitting in New York, where there's in New York and New Jersey, more life science professionals than Boston and San Francisco combined. And that's one of the big reasons we've established IndieBio New York there. And you're running the first cohort. What have been some of the learnings with this expansion?
So lots to learn, including what a great ecosystem and great opportunity there is within New York to build out, some of these problems that we've been talking about: human health, planetary health. These are problems that we all face, and the founders of the IndieBio New York cohort have that same mission in the companies that they are founding, as well as those in the San Francisco side. So I think that it's really a universal claim or rationale for building this out. But I think both Jun and Maya have really spoken about the talent that's out there. And you're right, Parikshit, there's a lot of talent here in New York. I think there's something like 7% of all postdocs are in New York City, not even New York State, just New York City, right? And that's only surpassed by, I know. I read that and I was like, wow. And to be honest, I was one of those postdocs. I moved here. So I could also recognize how few opportunities there were outside of, let's say, medical writing. And of course, Pfizer and some of the big pharma players do have offices in New York, but those are mostly office jobs. There's not a lot of actual biotech startups. So there's certainly a lot of opportunity because there's so much talent between all of the different research institutions within the area. And there's also a lot of investors. When you think of New York, you think of investors, right? But let me tell you a really super crazy statistic. So New York is really great at bringing in NIH dollars, third in the country behind not San Francisco, but California and Boston. So good at getting funding for those research institutions. But the venture capital, and this might be a little bit dated, is much less successful. Boston, for every NIH dollar brings in $1.82 of venture capital. And that helps founders to build out their companies, right? It's expensive to start a company and to get the resources that you need and those connections. And as of 2016 in New York, it was $0.06 of VC to match every NIH dollar. And I was just blown away by that statistic, because there's really an opportunity for investors to move into this space and to help to support some of those early stage companies. And that's one of the roles that I think IndieBio New York is really going to play, is to identify the talent that needs that chance, that opportunity to take their idea and turn it into a company with transformative technology, right? And hopefully we won't be alone. We'll be working with a whole number of people within the ecosystem, both other accelerators, as well as, of course, the investor network that we are currently building out.
That's great. So the goal is to create that hub to the many spokes. And
exactly.
Yeah, and another great point that June made was around people in tech and different industries transferring their learnings in. And Pae, you're an example of an electrical engineer that worked in policy in government and now working at IndieBio. And and Maya, myself, we're not biologists. We're working here, and that is a testament to diverse viewpoints. But it's also, yeah, we have a long ways to go as far as diversity is concerned in the ecosystem. What are some pointers you would give, or the call to action to diversity in our space that is still a nascent space and is mostly PhDs, postdocs?
That's a big question, Parikshit. So
I
good
like
thing we still have 20 minutes left here. No. I think one of the biggest things on the people side really is if biotech is going to be addressing these massive problems, right? We're trying to bite off human and planetary health. This is quite literally all encompassing. And you can't really address those problems well if you don't actually understand the problems. And if everybody comes from the same place or has the same life experience, you're not going to get a true understanding of what these problems really are that you're trying to solve. And reading about it or seeing pictures from other places it will only get you so far in really understanding what it's like on the ground. And so to be able to come up with the solutions is going to involve making this a bigger tent from the problem solving side and making sure that we are bringing in more people who can help us and who understand deeply what it is we're trying to address. So I think that's probably the biggest part of it. There's and the other piece of it is, we see this in STEM. I'm an electrical engineer. I was often the only woman in my classes in college. So it took me a good long while to realize the power of representation. Embarrassingly so, it took me a long time to understand that. And somebody recently, I heard them say, if you can't see it, you don't know that you can be it. And I think that as we're trying to make this a bigger tent, we need more people who are in the tent to help other people see that they can be a part of the tent. From a specifically this bioeconomy perspective, I recently learned about a team down in Salinas, what is it called? The Salad Bowl of America. And this is a team that's trying to bring biotech and bioengineering concepts to the local community and to educate and bring in more of the local community into this burgeoning bioeconomy so that they can not just be recipients of, but really active participants in this growing bioeconomy, this future of manufacturing. So that's just another example where getting a bigger tent, making sure that we have better representation, I think can be really powerful in terms of making what we do more relevant to solving the human and planetary health problems.
That's lovely. And I'd like to give the mic. I'm still in the old school panel when we didn't do it over Zoom, to Maya to empower us with some closing thoughts and news stories on this new world that we want to believe in. Maya, you have one of the loveliest hearts and visions for the world. I would love for you to leave us with some great thoughts around biotechnology and the new biotech.
Thank you.
Before we open it up to questions, of course.
Thank you so much. So yes, we are entering a new world, and the stories we want to make the news right now is that there are solutions to some of the largest global challenges. We're just not pulling our resources towards them enough. And instead of focusing on the lack of these solutions, we need to recognize that there's huge potential at our hands. And you know, if we can imagine this world where we can restore contaminated soil or improve crop yields or improve fertility for all, or make new blood supplies or cure disease, we're now able to create abundant supplies of protein and sustainable materials for building and making clothes and clean energy from waste. And all these materials that are used for manufacturing things, as Pae said, can now be made without extracting more resources from the earth. And this is the news we want to focus on and create. And it may all sound a little bit like magic, but it's really science and nature that is here to teach us. And I think what COVID has shown is that nature is really she's ruling us. And we need to stop and listen and reassess how we've been living. And Poe Bronson, IndieBio's managing director, and Arvind Gupta, IndieBio's founder and now partner at Mayfield Fund, just wrote a book called Decoding the World. And it's a roadmap for the questioner, anyone who wants to explore these ideas more. As we're expanding our understanding of biology as a technology, there is an opportunity to essentially rebuild the world. Imagine that. So we showcase these possibilities twice a year at our demo day. And there's one coming up next week. So we hope you all can join us there and help us write a news story using biology as a technology.
Thank you, Maya. That was great parting thought. Nature rules, science teaches. I love that. Biology will be a technology that will create human and planetary health. Great. I want to bring up some of the questions that have popped up in the chat. Francisco asks about biotechnology in LATAM, in Latin America. Jun, would you like to answer that? You have worked with a lot of teams in that geography.
Yeah, I think outside of probably the Bay Area, LATAM has been the biggest central source of companies that IndieBio has invested in. We've probably invested in over 12 different companies from Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Mexico. So yeah, I've definitely seen a lot of great science coming out of there and teams being built up. I think it kind of speaking to what Pae was talking about earlier around diversity, for me, it kind of goes back to the Petri dish idea that if you try a lot of different things, some of them will succeed, some of them will not, but the prerequisite for trying a lot of things is that diversity. You have to have, in any biological system, you have to have genetic diversity, idea diversity, technology diversity, market diversity, all these different things for a startup. So we've been very excited that we've had founders representing over 37 different countries. Some of them are people who maybe moved to the US to do their studies. Others are from those countries and live in those countries and will continue to build their companies in those respective countries. So we're really excited to help everyone around the world solve the problems that are impactful. Just like Pae said, that we're all in it together on this planet.
That's great. And Francisco, hope that answered your question. There is one very tactical question that I love tactical questions Scott asked, which is, what specific technical skills or technical skill do you think will have broad relevance in the goal of planetary health? I'll ask our Chief Technology Officer, Pae, what is the one specific technical skill that we should be thinking of?
Yeah, this is not really a technical skill per se, but you have to have an open-mindedness and a capacity to imagine the art of the possible. Everything that we do is so intersectional from a technical perspective. I mean, look at our team right here. We've got immuno-oncology expert, a microbiologist, an economy expert, and a communications expert, all sitting here together. And we can't do this as individuals. And so that ability to intersect with disparate fields and work at those interfaces is probably the most important skill set as we're moving forward in turning biotechnology into a broader capability. So sorry to not give you the silver bullet there.
That's great. Thank you for answering that. I will actually, the next question, I will merge two questions. One is around legislative lobbying work and groups like New York Bio that Yasmin asked, and the other is around regulations and just legislation in the field and what steps are needed. Maybe Julie, do you have a take on just different groups in New York ecosystem and broader, in a broader sense around regulation? How do we think about regulation in our space?
So regulation is one thing that I think every company sees as a challenge, whether they are bringing something through that's going to be a new way to decontaminate our soils, as Maya mentioned, and thinking about how you need to go through those EPA regulatory hurdles, or of course, if you have a new therapeutic, how you're going to get that to market, what indication you're going to have. And we do work with experts in all of the various regulatory fields. And in specific with the New York ecosystem, I can say it's been entirely collaboratory, working and building out the network there. IndieBio has spoken with New York Bio. We are, I think Poe is going to be the keynote speaker at a real estate and real estate event happening in New York. New York builds out real estate. I actually forget what the exact name of the conference is, but Poe and Steve Chambers, the managing director at IndieBio New York, will both be there, along with Charles Schumer. So there's certainly an intersection of, legislature and the different types of key players who are necessary to move this forward at very high levels. So I think that everyone is aware, from those working at the ground, at the bench to develop the technology, all the way up to like key thought leaders, thinking about what processes are necessary to make biology the technology of the 21st century. And that IndieBio is certainly one of those key players, speaking with people in all of these different sectors.
I also wanted to add on to that, Julie. Several of our founders who are creating new categories, such as those like cell-based meats, they are entering the space using their voices to explore more of the policy issues and to become thought leaders in that area. So we do encourage our founders, when they begin with us, to get involved with those conversations and those groups.
Exactly.
Okay, moving on to the question from Nate. We can do a quick lightning round. And before I do so, Nate in the chat has also authored a report on the role of fermentation in all proteins with the Good Food Institute. So I want to give a shout out to Nate for the report. We love the reports that GFI produces. I'd encourage people to go and check it out. So Nate asks us, what applications of biotechnology that are not cell ag excite us the most? So I'll do a quick lightning round with June. What's one technology that's not cell ag that's exciting you the most?
For crop and agriculture, I think microbe stuff is really interesting because we've been ruining the environment with our chemicals and antibiotics and all growth promoters and stuff like that, we're really changing the way nature intended organisms to synergistically grow with plants. And so we've seen several companies now already in this space of trying to rebalance the natural microbial cultures.
Maya?
Oh, I've always been enamored by neurotech. I think there's a lot to explore within our own minds. I think the mind is the last frontier, as was the first frontier.
Julie?
I echo June in terms of some of the microbiome technologies that are coming online based on, now that we've done enough basic research, starting to understand, excuse me, some of those key players who are there, how you can feed them to make them benefit things like your skin or your oral microbiome. And I think that there's still a lot left to be discovered, but that we're just starting to see some of those applications really come to the forefront in truly scientifically backed ways.
Great. Pae?
I think microbes, but in a very different context. So a lot of the work that's going into enabling the circular economy and remediating waste and turning that into either less harmful or a beneficial output, and leveraging biological entities, whether they're microbes or otherwise, is a huge opportunity for us to do some good.
Awesome. And I'll take the last 3 minutes to see if we can address this curious question that Mahmoud poses here, which is, current technologies are fantastic and beautiful and powerful. This acts like a flash of light, making us not see the real problem, the solutions. Please comment. Yeah, that's quite a curious question, and I guess there is a warm glow or a bright lightning bolt that comes with every technology. What are our thoughts on the pains and gains of a technology-driven economy in the world? June?
June, do you want to go first?
Yes.
It's okay.
I'm taking a little liberty at my interpretation of this comment. I think it's around, so the way I see with biology, there is one of the biggest problems that we help founders with when they enter our program is really to understand where their technology is matching and solving a problem in the real world. I think in academia, a lot of times you build from the technology up. So you talk about, here's the technology I've developed, and then in like the last paragraph of your discussion section, you say this could be applied to X, Y, and Z, right? And when you do that, and I think like computational tech and like apps and stuff like that sometimes have this problem too, where it's all about like building the technology, but maybe you're missing what you're actually solving for. You're so in love with the technology itself that you are you actually prioritizing the right things? Are you actually, is cost an actual driver? Is speed an actual driver? Is usability and the actual driver? So that's what we really try to get our companies to explore in our program immediately, is have them go out and talk to customers, right? Talk to who your actual end users might be. Many times people will find out that the end users that they thought were their end users are not actually the right end users. So they have to go on a chase to go find who that is, and then also figure out what value they're actually providing to those end users. What would cause them to say, okay, I want to pay for this and give it to me next week because I want this so bad. That finding that product market fit, I think, is the biggest challenge for all biotech companies. Yeah, I'll end it there.
We can't
Pae,
hear
what-
you, Parikshit.
Yeah, Pae, I think that you should follow up. I saw you raise your hand.
Oh, I mean, June said it very, very well. I would only add, I think to Mahmood's point as well, that when biology is instantiated into a technology, we're usually seeing it in the form of a single point solution, and it's not necessarily going to be something that solves an entire sector or an entire portion of the economy. One single physical instantiation of a solution does not suddenly completely fulfill our needs on climate change, for example. So that the warm glow around that technology does help to, I think, open people's eyes up to that larger space once we get these pinpoint solutions into place.
Great, great. Well, I want to be respectful of people's times, especially our panelists. I know you guys are all very busy with demo day right around the corner, and we have a good 19 startups that are, hustling hard to get data over the line by demo day. So I won't keep you from the startups and other duties you have. Really appreciate the time, the stories, and the insights that were shared today. And to the attendees, again, thank you for joining us at this time, and I hope it's not the new normal that we are in, being at home against the backdrop of a pandemic. It's the new biotech that excites us, and I do think, gauging by the smiles we have from our panelists, that this panel did help towards that. So thank you again.
Thank you, Parikshit. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Parikshit.
Thanks, Parikshit.
Great. Take care, guys.
Bye.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.